The world is watching. As war rages on in Ukraine, a high-stakes summit in Paris is underway, aiming to shape the future of peace. But can it deliver? Will this coalition of nations be enough to deter Russia? Or is it just another round of diplomatic posturing? And what if the United States, arguably the most crucial player, refuses to get involved? Stay with us as we break down the latest developments, key statements from world leaders, and the real impact this could have on the battlefield and beyond. World leaders are meeting in Paris in an attempt to create a more detailed roadmap toward a potential ceasefire in Ukraine. British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has emphasized that any lasting peace must involve a force capable of deterring further aggression from Russia. But the question remains, who is actually willing to commit boots on the ground? Under the proposed plan, British and French defense leaders will head to Ukraine to discuss strategies for deploying forces. While the UK and France appear ready to take action, other nations are hesitant. French President Emmanuel Macron acknowledged that while Europe hopes for the best, it must also prepare for the worst, especially if the United States refuses to back this effort. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, speaking at the summit, reiterated his belief that Russia has no interest in genuine peace talks. He warned that Russian President Vladimir Putin is playing a long game, working tirelessly to divide Europe from the United States and weaken international resolve. Putin wants division between Europe and America, between European nations, and even within the United States itself, Zelensky stated. That is his strategy, and if we let our guard down, he wins. Starmer echoed this sentiment, arguing that now is not the time to ease up on sanctions, but to increase economic pressure on Moscow. Putin is back to his old playbook, stalling for time while continuing his aggression, Starmer said. The world cannot afford to wait for him to act in good faith. Macron further detailed the proposed British-French mission to Ukraine, which is being labeled a reassurance force rather than a peacekeeping force. The objective, Macron explained, is not to provide direct combat support, but to assist Ukraine in securing critical infrastructure, training troops, and strengthening defenses in key areas. A crucial element of this discussion is Ukraine's urgent need for air support. Analysts point out that while Ukraine has nearly 1 million troops in uniform, it lacks the aerial capabilities to counter Russian air superiority. European nations are now considering stationing fighter jets in Poland and Romania to conduct air patrols over Ukraine, effectively establishing a protective air presence. Meanwhile, in the Black Sea, Ukraine faces the challenge of Russian naval dominance. European nations are discussing efforts to clear sea mines and secure shipping lanes to ensure Ukraine can export its grain and receive essential supplies more efficiently. However, these efforts require a coordinated military presence, and once again, questions remain about American involvement. In a striking moment at the summit, Zelensky was asked directly whether peace talks should be conducted in Saudi Arabia, a neutral ground that has hosted past negotiations. His response was blunt. Putin wants more war. He is not interested in real talks. If he were, we would have had them already. Another key issue raised was the role of U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who has been criticized for his approach to the conflict. Zelensky dismissed him as a real estate man living in a different reality, implying that Witkoff lacks the strategic understanding needed to navigate this war. The Ukrainian leader suggested that American diplomacy needs a stronger, more decisive hand guiding it. But perhaps the biggest question of all is whether the United States will step in to reinforce this European-led effort. Some European leaders argue that without U.S. backing, any military presence in Ukraine will be more symbolic than effective. The goal, they say, is to demonstrate European commitment and in doing so, persuade Washington to contribute intelligence, air support, and strategic coordination. And that brings us to a critical moment. As European leaders continue their discussions, they must soon present their case to Washington. Their pitch? That Europe is stepping up, taking the lead in defending its own backyard. Now they'll turn to President Trump and ask, will America stand with its allies, or will it leave Europe to face Russia alone? As the summit discussions intensify, we also need to consider the broader geopolitical consequences. If the U.S. chooses to withhold support, will China and other global players interpret this as a weakening of Western unity? What impact will this have on NATO's future, especially as Eastern European nations push for stronger defense commitments? These questions will shape the next phase of the conflict, making this summit one of the most consequential in recent history. Moreover, public sentiment is playing a significant role. In many European countries, support for Ukraine remains strong, but concerns about military escalation and economic consequences are growing. Governments must carefully balance their military strategies with domestic political realities. The pressure is mounting, and decisions made in the coming weeks will have long-term implications, not just for Ukraine, but for global stability as a whole. We'll be following this story closely as new details emerge. What do you think? Will the United States commit to supporting Ukraine, or will Europe be forced to stand on its own? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates on this developing situation.